All righty. Hey there, everyone. Yeah, thanks for hopping into a webinar here today. In the fast changing landscape of AI, there's always stuff to be learning about and different things you can catch up on. So that's really what this webinar series is for. You probably know I'm sort of a casual person if you know me. So I'll just kind of be taking you through some things that are in the Dynamics ecosystem that relate to AI that are particularly helpful, especially in accounting. I'll try to tie all things back to accounting and why you should care about all of this. So, um, we'll kind of go through a couple different tools that are available. We'll go through some theoretical stuff. We'll go into the machine learning studio in its actual state right now, show you a bit about that, because that's the thing I know the most about. And we'll kind of go from there. So, if you have any questions during this, feel free to ask them. We are going to create a little video out of this at the end, but I'll save all questions for the end and stop the recording. So, no fear of sharing more information that you want. And another point of note, if you're watching this, if you're a partner, VAR, reseller, another ISV that fits in our space, we're always doing these webinars. We're sort of getting back into doing them more often. So if you want to do a webinar with us, if you got a topic in mind, definitely reach out. It would be great to have some co-presenters on these things. So definitely reach out. So, sort of one of the frameworks on this is you can definitely be using some of these AI tools to help advance yourself and advance your career in technology generally, as well as your career in either just back off or accounting practices as well. Three things you can do, and really, this is my story a couple of years ago at this point, is establish yourself as that resident AI expert. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue. Nobody knows exactly what it means. Nobody knows exactly how to implement these tools into their particular products or processes. But that means there's room for you to take the lead on it. And once you've decided you're going to like invest some time into this and sort of learn as much as you can, you really can be the driver of change at your organization. If you bring real real world scenarios to your company that you think AI can be helpful, I think people will be very, very receptive to it, and that will, help you out along the way. And part of what we're going to talk about here today is the obvious thing to do is to pick the low hanging fruit in these scenarios, as opposed to giant complex AI projects that everybody knows theoretically sort of makes sense. But it's sort of hard to make that leap into something that actually helps you in the day to day, and that's what we'll be talking about here, really in quite a bit of detail. And then the story on this that I think kind of frames all of it is I feel like there's a lot of pushback to AI, and rightfully so. It's sort of overblown to some degree, but it's sort of the equivalent of deciding that you aren't going to start using Excel in the late 80s. At a certain point, yes, it probably is overblown the hype, but it is a paradigm shift. And I think, sort of ignoring it is not the solution, especially from a career perspective. The people who know how to utilize this better are going to be the ones who are better off as time goes on. So who am I? My name is Kevin Pritchard. I'm the head product owner over at Fidesic. We're an ISV in the Dynamics space. I've been in the Dynamics community. I guess I need to update this slide. Coming up on 15 years. I'm just sort of a nerd for learning things. I was big into mining and learning about crypto ages and ages ago. I've definitely learned quite a bit in the past few about AI and machine learning. I definitely had a server in my basement at one time doing GPTs before there was a web-based version of it, just so I could experiment with it and learn about large language models on my own. So it's always been a passion of mine. I'm basically heading the initiatives at Fidesic to implement more AI tools into what we do, some of which I'll talk about in great detail. So our agenda for today, we'll have some AI news because the stuff is always changing. We'll have some general guidance on what you should do before you think about deploying these. We'll talk about the Power Platform generally, how this all goes together. And then we'll do a quick overview of 3 different tools that I think you should investigate and get used to. They're sort of a good microcosm of the different types of tools that are available. So if you learn these, you can kind of learn how this works in different frameworks as well. So just to catch up on some of the news, specifically Copilot for Finance has launched today. Today is the first day it's available in public preview. So I would recommend going and checking it out. We'll be talking about Copilot as it relates to Power BI today in more detail, because that's obviously been out for a bit longer. But pretty much everything we'll talk about here is going to be applicable for the finance one. So that's out as of today, just launched. I got an email about an hour ago when I was running through this. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Also very, very recently launched is Copilot on Azure. So again, basically a chat bot handcrafted by Microsoft that will allow you to, ask questions about your Azure environment, configure it, help out on that front. That is also very recently launched. And also, as of November last year, there is now an Azure AI Studio available, which is designed to be sort of your one-stop shop for any AI tools that you want to deploy yourself. I believe the Machine Learning Studio is a part of that whole framework, which is something that we'll be talking about here today. That's the thing that I think is very powerful. But yeah, Azure AI Studio. So if you're looking to build more technical tools, if you want to deploy these on a larger scale, Azure AI Studio is a great spot to check on that. And here's my little screenshot from an email just today. Microsoft Copilot for Finance is out in public preview. So some general framework for all of this, things to think about before you deploy any of this. Part one, which is becoming more common to talk about, is don't just make something and tag on the frame or tag on the phrase AI to the end of it because it's cool, it's trendy, it's what everybody's talking about. The world does not need us to generate a bunch of AI social media content. The world does not need another generic chatbot that works functionally the same as all the other ones. Think about what problems you're trying to solve, I guess, is the main framework on this. Before you even get to that point, though, you got to think about your organization as a whole. Does any sort of AI tool even align with your overall strategy? Obviously, in most cases, you can make a case for it at this point. But there are certainly cases where that doesn't make sense. If you're a pure creative firm, I'm not sure it does make sense to make AI a core part of what you do. And that goes along with responsible AI, which is make sure that you're encoding your culture and your values into everything that you're doing, and make sure that that culture and value is also scalable. At Fidesic, we think making things as efficient and user-friendly and empowering users as much as possible is one of the cores of what we do. That does align with AI to a large degree. But again, it totally depends. If you're a creative firm, a graphic design firm, it might not make sense to use it at all, depending on what your core values are and what your focus is. And of course, if you're going to be talking about AI, the way to frame all of this is to make sure that it's still people first in its focus. These tools at their best enable everybody to be more functional, everybody to be a little bit smarter, everybody to have a little bit bigger window on the world. And at their worst, people are using them to generate images that have no soul, generate content that nobody actually cares about just for generating content. And that one's close to home for me. Don't let AI replace human creativity. I don't think it's particularly good anyway. Once we've established that we're a company that this makes sense, we're going to do it in a way that enhances humans' productivity. You got to focus on what your actual business objectives are. So the two obvious ones are to improve the customer experience, which is something that you can do by adding some tools to give them more insights. And sort of the larger one that's more back office focused is going to be improving your forecasting, projections, your analysis of existing data to see what happened. And that's largely what we're going to be talking about here today. The more simple version of that is Copilot for Power BI. You can analyze the data that you already have. You can analyze the reports that you already have. You can come up with some custom reports for that data. very easy to use. We'll hop into that. And the more complex is that version of that is you can use your existing data in Machine Learning Studio to train your own custom algorithms that can make predictions. And we'll talk about that in great detail here. So all of this sort of fits into the same framework, which is really the Microsoft Power Platform, 365 platform, Dynamics 365. I'm not going to say they have the best naming scheme for all of this stuff, but it all sort of falls under the same umbrella. What we will be talking about here is Power BI and how we can have Copilot on top of that. We'll be talking about Power Virtual Agents. That's an easy to deploy virtual agent that you can train to make a little bit better than just a generic one. And we'll be talking about the Azure Machine Learning Studio, as it's really a front-end tool that is both usable for non-developers and quite friendly for developers to really break down your own data, use the power of machine learning and AI to analyze it in ways that would have been extremely difficult before without spinning up your own development environment specific to that task. So fairly recently launched is the Copilot for Power BI. It's a part of the Microsoft Fabric framework. It is available at this point to nearly everyone. It's not going to be available to, I think all regions still have a lock on it. You do have to be on the higher tier plans to have the ability to enable it. But it is something that you have to go actually opt in and enable directly. But if you've used Copilot in any other context, it should feel quite familiar with what it is. It's basically a language-driven model that allows you to just, sort of use casual language as you communicate with it, and can help you analyze your existing data and even come up with new custom reports to add to your dashboards on Power BI. So to enable it, you have to go into your admin settings and go through, and you can just search for Copilot once you're in your settings. If you don't have this view, that means you're probably not a high enough admin to enable this, but you do need to enable Copilot settings in 2 spots to actually turn this on. Which does require sending some data out to be processed. It is temporarily used, not stored locally or not stored permanently in any way, but you do have to manually enable to turn on the Power BI Copilot as it exists now. So that's something that you have to go turn on yourselves. It's really simple as turning that on, and then when you go back to your Copilot page, you'll get your welcome to Copilot. Of course, they give their disclaimers that inaccuracies are possible, which is definitely the case, and your data is used temporarily. So hopefully improve and make things better. I'll grab some screenshots of this just to kind of give you an overview of how this process works. But basically, like I said, if you're familiar with Copilot, it's going to largely operate the same of the other Copilots. But in my initial testing with it, it does seem quite functional, and it seems pretty smart in terms of what it generates. So our prompt in here, create a page that shows reseller sales and profit margin by product over the last few years. It'll go through and generate that dashboard or that board for you that'll have some data on it. The beauty of this is with most AI tools, if you've used them, it's not necessarily that it gets it 100% right out of the gate. It's that you were able to use natural language to then iterate on this and make changes to it. So if it's displaying something that's not exactly right, if you don't understand how it's working for whatever reason, or if the data doesn't make sense, you can ask for it to explain the data. You can ask for it to make modifications to it. And you don't have to be a Power BI expert to do that. You can really just handle it through Copilot. The thing that I like about the Copilot framework generally is it doesn't limit the tools that you have. So if you're super familiar with Power BI and you know how to modify it and tweak it on your own, you can use this as a way to just get insight on specific parts of it, and as a way to create things that maybe you're not so familiar with. And once it gets started, you can then go through and use your existing tools to do so. So yeah, I played around with this, did a couple different things. Last one, create a page to analyze trends, patterns, and drivers of internet sales across products and customers. It'll split it into categorization, show you growth year over year. If that's not exactly what you want, again, you can make tweaks to it. It's not a one shot and done. And this is something that can be extremely useful for everybody on the Dynamics platform, but specifically in accounting, this is something that can really help you out in terms of your ability to generate slick reports have some new insights. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the new framework for being an accountant generally. As more and more tasks specifically get sort of automated, and the data entry side of things goes away more and more, your ability to come up with creative insights and see data in a new way is definitely what's going to differentiate you as an employee, which is something that we are trying to discuss here today. So we got an attendee. Will this recording be available after the session? Yep, we are recording this right now, so it will be available later on. So getting back to this is the type of thing that can separate you as a accounts payable person, for example, right? This data already exists. If you have your whole dynamic suite configured properly, it should have access to this data. If you're using Power BI on your dashboard for BC specifically, then it should be pretty easy to plug this in and generate you new custom reports. So that's thing one that I think is worth exploring as somebody who's getting more and more interested in AI tools generally. And then the other framework, which I'm not sure I mentioned perfectly on this, is these are sort of like the three different fronts that I think of AI on. There's, help you analyze your data better. There's have chat agents that help reduce your workload and other aspects. And then there's ways to, forecast and really project your data even further. So the second one I mentioned on this is, creating something that can help your customer experience. And this is something that can also be used internally. This is one of my pet projects that I haven't yet launched, but it would be an internal virtual agent that, can read through meeting notes and provide context on things that, you forgot from a meeting from 6 months ago. So the cool thing about virtual agent, which is just built into the Power Platform directly, is it's extremely easy to deploy. If you know nothing about code at all, I think you can probably figure it out and do it. And it's also extremely easy to train and provide some additional data on. So right from Azure or right from the Power Tools, you can go create yourself a bot, create a Power Virtual Agent. Really, all you have to do is give it a name. And then the most critical part of this, in my opinion, is boost your conversation with generative answers. And that really enables some extra features that sets it up. So once you click through that, click next, click create. That's really it. So boost conversation coverage with generative answers. This is still technically in preview, but I think it's pretty well established at this point. So this is something I built for our product. So we sent it to our help guide, we sent it to our marketing site, and then we also gave it access to Microsoft Dynamics GP training guides and Dynamics 365 generally training guides. And what this will do is this will sort of prioritize answers with the sources that you've given it. So if it's asking, if your user is asking a question about how to use the site, they can use these as a reference, and it will check that first. That's really the main advantage of doing it this way, as opposed to a totally generic chat bot. You can provide it that context. You can sort of tip the scale so it answers in ways that you think you care about. Once you've done this, and literally we're talking like a handful of clicks here, we've now got the preview version. So the preview version, which you can test out, ask it questions. It is referencing our help guide here, providing some information on it. You can also ask additional questions on it, which is really helpful. And the other cool thing is once you've done your initial testing, you can publish it. This will create a custom publish link, which you can then send to your team. So as opposed to you just throwing some questions at it and making sure that it sounds good, you can also push this out to your entire team, tell them, hey, we've got this new agent, go test it out, give me some feedback, let's make modifications. It's a custom website you can send people to. And then once you've done that, deploying it is extremely simple as well. All you really need to do is go to your settings here, your channels, and then deploying it is just a matter of deploying it to a custom website. It'll give you your embed code. If you've used any content management system over the years, you probably know how to do this. If not, send it to your team that manages the site that you're trying to deploy this chatbot on, and that's all you got to do. Everything that you did for training, providing help guides, that was all set up on the like actual app side, and then deploying it and actually showing it to people is just a matter of copy and pasting code in. So that's another really easy thing to just get in and play around with. Make sure that you're learning about the capabilities of this. That's one of my main takeaways on all this, where I hope is one of the main takeaways on all of this is like most of these tools are just available to go attempt to use, play around with, learn. The more you get familiar with it, I think the easier it's going to be to see the potential applications for these things in your particular environment. So the final one that I want to talk about is the Microsoft Machine Learning Studio. It's definitely the most, I guess, dev-heavy version of all of these. But it does have some things that I think you can get into, even if you're not a developer, to learn a bit about what we're trying to do. So the framework for all of this is, all right, we've got a super complex problem or a super complex data set that we want to analyze and use to solve future problems. The beauty of this is if you have your data in Azure already, it is quite simple to connect it to your Azure data environment. You can do custom queries to pull only exactly what you need out of that data. It also has lots of automated features to help you pick the right model, analyze things, and it also has access to thousands of machine learning models by default. There's some neural network models. And the other really cool thing about this, which I'll show you once we actually get into it, is it's quite easy to set up like actual compute units, like I've alluded to in the past. The old days you had to set up a server farm physically. Now it's just a matter of building one virtually and deploying it for your machine learning tasks. So as we talked about, this is for analyzing data in a more detailed or complex way. So to think about this, it's like, what are you trying to predict? And then based on that, what data sets do you have available that can be predictive of that? The main part of all of this, as anybody who has experience with machine learning will tell you, is preparing your data, aka doing pre-processing, is probably the biggest part of this entire process. There are some built-in tools to help with that, but I'll be honest in that a lot of the pre-processing is still going to require you to think about it manually. And that is sort of the biggest component of it. So you got to go backwards in time. What are you trying to predict? What data do you have that would be valuable for it? And then the follow-up step is, how do you clean up that data to be useful in a machine learning environment? And then the next steps are actually the easy parts. Connecting the data, no problem. I'll show you how to do that. Pick a model, no problem. Training can use up some compute resources, but other than that, it's not the most complex thing. And then deploying it is really just an extra step on top of all of this at the end. So I have some prepared stuff, but let's go into real world. It's more fun that way. So the way that you can think about the Machine Learning Studio, and again, this is all just available as a part of Azure. You can deploy a workspace like I have here. We've got multiple workspaces. This is just like my demo workspace environment. We do have our production ones that we use for internal tasks. But this is really the interface, and it gives you everything that you need for actually setting up a machine learning environment. So the two examples I'll give on the use cases for this, one is like the training example that we went through as a part of like the Learn Machine Learning Studio course. And then the second is what we're using it for in the real world, because I think it kind of frames what's possible here. So one of the examples that they use in the training on this is you've got all this data set up and stored about your temperature data, your day of the week, your traffic, your sales. And in this case, let's say you own a bicycle rental studio. Nice and simplistic example. What the example allows you to do is feed all that data in, train a model on how to predict how many bike sales you can expect on any given day based on all those variables, and then spit out an output. So that's like classic sort of regression analysis where you want to have a number as your output. You have a bunch of data points for the years of your business, and you can put those in, train up a model, and get a result as your outcome on what you can roughly predict. The example that we're using internally is a classification model, which is we look at invoice data and then predict what dimensions or GL codes need to be associated with that. Relates directly to accounting, as you can imagine. And that's the type of thing that machine learning is really good at. You got a ton of sample data, you've got a ton of good results, and you want to be able to predict in the future based on that information. So that's the way I think about machine learning in terms of when is it a good application? Do you have lots of data, and are you trying to predict something based on that data? That's what actually matters. So to get started with this, step one is you need some data. And data can be as simple as a bike rental spreadsheet that you have. So if you got the data stored locally, it can be as simple as that. In our internal case at Fidesic, we've connected it with a special database that we've set up that has some invoice data on it specifically for training. But step one is to actually connect some data. So once you've got your data connected, you've got two different options on how you can approach from there. So step one, if your data is already in great shape, you can use the automated machine learning tools that are built into Azure. So if we go into one of these data sets that we printed out here, basically what automated machine learning does is it will test your data against several hundred different models that are already built into the site and give you an output of what it thinks that best model is. As you can see, our best model is this extremely complicated long name model that it went through. And you can check out the models that actually are the output of this. So the winning one for the bike model is going to be, we have our actual model outputs here. So extreme scalar wrapper, extreme random trees. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what's contained within this model, but that is the type of model that you would then use for training. If you need to do more pre-processing on your data to clean it up, to make it more friendly, then you can use the designer. And this designer is really where the bulk of what's going to be set up actually takes place anyways. So we've got our data, we've got our automated, if we want to come up with the model, we've got our designer to use the model. And then to do any of this, we're going to need some compute units. So this is what I've alluded to, that this is also just built in here. You can build a cluster of compute clusters or instances here. These are really easy to set up. You can just basically pay for how much resource you think you actually need. In this simple example, we just needed a CPU processing unit. For our more complex GL code classification example that I've been working on, that is a full array of GPUs doing the actual processing. And then this, once you've got this set up, this is what actually does the analysis. So again, you need some compute units to actually run the data. This is how you set it up. It's quite easy to do. Assuming you need to set something up, the designer is where to do it. And think of designer as the actual like workflow of your machine learning project. So it's a nice visual editor, which makes it easy to follow along with what's going on. And every one of these nodes is fully configurable. So in this example, we've got some automobile price data that we're trying to make predictions on. You can then pick what columns you want from your data set. Again, just using SQL, nice and easy. You can clean up missing data, normalize the data. There's a whole breadth of knowledge out there about how to pre-process data. I suggest it's worth looking into. It's far beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but you can add all those pre-processing steps here. So this is what I was talking about, where if your data is perfect, you can send it to automated and run it against everything. If you need to clean it up first, you can do it using this designer. And then this is the actual model that you're going to run against this data. So there's a ton of different built-in models into this situation. So we've got all our models that we could potentially have. These are customizable too. So you can make modifications to it, change how it actually analyzes it. But at the end of the day, this is your machine learning flow. So you've got your input data, you clean your input data, you split it off, you train it against a model, and then you get an evaluation or an output of that. And what you'll do is you'll submit this flow to one of your compute units, and that is what is going to give you an output, which one will allow you to send real world data in it after the fact, and two will tell you how good your model is actually doing. So you get an output. It's really a process of going through this and tweaking it and making sure that you're improving more and more and more. So once you've done that, you've run your data through, you've got an output of what you've got a good model that is fairly predictive or predictive enough for your purposes. What you can actually do then is you can connect that to your real world data. So in the same sort of interface where you have your designer, you can submit it here. And then you've got the difference of this is not only do you have your models that you've trained on, you also have the ability to have a web service input and a web service output on that. So this is when we start predicting with real world data. We're able to send some new data in, run it through the same transformations, run it through our evaluation and our thing that we trained up on, and then we've got a web service output. So I know this seems like a whole lot, but the hardest part of this is just like sort of understanding how the flow works, and then it's just a matter of playing around with the data. So again, the steps would really be pick what you're trying to solve, build a data set for it. You got your data set, allocate some compute units so you can figure out what's going on, design a model and train your data against it, and then you can go back and connect it through to that real world data. So I didn't want to go too long on this session. I know the longer that these sorts of things go, the more people start to tune out. So we are going to keep it fairly short here today. But hopefully that's helpful for sort of the framework for how machine learning actually works and how you can use it in the real world here. So I actually showed you that in the real world. So as I talked about, we actually use this in our software, our model for doing predictions. And the reason is I think AP is really ripe for it. I don't think people have explored it as much as they will over the next few years, but we're already really good at data capture, and we have large data sets, so we should be able to make good predictions on that. And why we've focused on this and why AI is so critical to what we do is we think that, we can be sort of the utmost experts in this and then provide what we've learned in these results to our end clients. So our example is through our Magic Capture system, which is the product that we have built really with AI at the core. There's no templates. It's AI first capture in terms of data extraction. And in terms of using that machine learning tools that we've discussed here in great detail to actually apply dimensions and apply GL coding is something that we built into the product as well. And all of this combined is I think a very compelling combination of these tools. And if you're looking for something easy that you can say, I plugged AI into the pipeline, if you're on Dynamics BC or Dynamics GP, our version of all of this that I've learned over the past several years is available. It's plug and play as our product Magic Capture. And I think it's a really cool thing that is now available to pretty much anybody if you want to do some invoice capture. So I do obviously encourage everyone to go explore this on their own and find their own unique cases. Everybody's data is going to be different. Our particular use case is always going to be focused on AP. And that's why we built what we built in the way that we've done. I do want to end with some resources here that we have as well. We'll make this available if you're watching this on a YouTube video or on LinkedIn after the fact. We'll try to link those in there. But the courses that are available for machine learning specifically on Microsoft's training programs are really, really, really good. I've gone through a bunch of them. They give you real world examples. They give you, sort of a framework on how to understand all this. And that was really the thing that got me started into all of this, is these training paths. So definitely look into it. And then once you get into that, you can definitely also just search for Microsoft's machine learning algorithm cheat sheet. I won't show it here because it looks kind of like a nightmare, but it is actually very, very helpful. So I'll end the recording here. Thanks to all who attended live. And if you want to hang around and ask some questions, go for it. So thanks a lot, everybody.